Millions of women are drowning in silence, and they've been taught to believe it's their fault. You come home after working all day. Maybe you're a teacher, a nurse, a project manager, or you've put your career on hold to raise children. And before you even take off your coat, you're already bracing yourself for the sigh, the eye roll, the passive comment about dinner or laundry, or how you overreacted again. You give everything, your time, your energy, your emotional labor, and still, you're made to feel like you're too much, and yet never enough. Society told you that if you were loving, patient, and selfless, your marriage would be your sanctuary. But instead, it's become a place where your voice is minimized, your exhaustion is ignored, and your needs are treated like inconveniences. You've tried talking, you've tried therapy, you've tried shrinking yourself to keep the peace. And still, you lie awake at night wondering, why do I feel so alone in my own home? What if I told you, you're not broken, you're not needy, you're not too emotional? What if I told you that your pain isn't personal, it's systemic? That for decades, women have been conditioned to believe that love means sacrifice, but never told that real partnership requires reciprocity. That your quiet resentment isn't a flaw, it's your intuition screaming that something is deeply wrong. You've been gaslit into thinking that if your husband doesn't see your worth, it's because you haven't done enough. But here's the truth, they don't want you to know. A healthy relationship doesn't leave you constantly questioning your sanity. Think of Sarah, a 42-year-old mother of two in Ohio. She wakes up at 5 a.m. to pack lunches, gets her kids to school, works a full shift as an ER nurse, comes home to cook, clean, and soothe her husband's stress, only to be told she's nagging when she asks for 5 minutes of help. She cries in the shower so no one hears her. She thinks she's failing. Or Maya, a 36-year-old software engineer in Seattle. Brilliant, driven, successful. But in her marriage, her opinions are dismissed as dramatic. When she brought up saving for their future, her husband laughed and said, "Relax, I've got it." Except he doesn't. And when she tries to lead, she's called controlling. Or Diane, 58, recently divorced after 25 years. She gave up her dream of opening a bakery to support her husband's career. Now she's rebuilding her life from scratch, while he's already dating someone half her age. And the worst part? People say, you chose that life, as if love was a surrender, not a shared journey. You're not crazy. It's not your fault. You're not alone. The real crisis isn't that women are too demanding. It's that we've been sold a lie, that love means enduring disrespect, that loyalty means silence, that being a good wife means disappearing into the background of someone else's story. But here's what they won't tell you. Respect isn't earned through service. It's the foundation of true intimacy. You don't have to earn the right to be heard. You don't have to perform gratitude to deserve kindness. And you certainly don't have to shrink your light so someone else can feel tall. This isn't about blaming men. It's about exposing a broken script, one that tells women to give endlessly while teaching men that receiving is their right, not their responsibility. And the most dangerous part, we've been trained to blame ourselves when the script fails. But what if the script was rigged from the start? What if your exhaustion isn't weakness, but wisdom? What if your anger isn't hysteria, but clarity? What if your longing for partnership isn't selfishness, but sanity? You were never meant to carry this alone. And you were never meant to confuse endurance with love. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just truth. It's your permission to reclaim your life. Marriage isn't a trap. It's not a prison, a scam, or a slow-motion robbery designed to drain men while discarding women. And yet, so many of you feel trapped anyway. Not because marriage itself is broken, but because you were never taught what it actually requires. You were sold a fairy tale, that love is enough, that commitment guarantees care, that if you just give more, stay quiet longer, and smooth over one more conflict, peace will finally come. But real marriage isn't passive. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you build deliberately daily with someone who chooses to build it with you. The truth no one tells you? Marriage is a skill, not a status. You wouldn't expect to pilot a plane without training. You wouldn't launch a business without a plan. Yet we send millions of people into lifelong partnerships with nothing but romantic movies and family trauma as their guide. And when it crumbles, we blame the institution. Or worse, we blame ourselves. But here's what the data shows. People in healthy marriages report higher life satisfaction, better physical health, greater financial stability, and deeper emotional resilience. Not because a wedding ring magically fixes everything, but because two willing people learned how to navigate conflict, share power, and protect each other's dignity. The problem isn't marriage. The problem is entering it without eyes wide open, without boundaries, without self-knowledge, without a partner who sees you as an equal, not an accessory. You don't need to fear marriage. You need to respect it enough to demand that it be worthy of you, because you were never meant to disappear into it. You were meant to grow inside it, alongside someone who honors your light, not someone who dims it to feel safer in the dark. This isn't about staying or leaving. It's about waking up and realizing if your marriage feels like a cage, it's not because you said, "I do." It's because someone stopped showing up and you were taught to call that love. But it's not too late to rewrite the story. Starting with this truth, you don't owe your life to a contract that doesn't honor your humanity. You've been told that if your husband doesn't respect you, it's because you're not commanding it the right way. Too soft, too harsh, too emotional, too cold. But here's the truth they bury beneath layers of blame. Respect isn't something you earn through performance. It's something you're owed simply because you're human. And in a real partnership, respect flows both ways. Not as a reward for silence, not as a prize for perfect behavior, but as the baseline, the air you both breathe. Yet so many women are living in relationships where their opinions are dismissed with a smirk, their concerns labeled overreactions, their wisdom reduced to nagging. You speak, and your words vanish into a void of defensiveness or indifference. You try to lead, and you're called controlling. You set a boundary, and you're accused of being difficult. Meanwhile, his needs are treated as non-negotiable. His stress is a crisis. His comfort is the priority. His authority is assumed. Yours is questioned. This isn't equality. This isn't partnership. This is emotional asymmetry, and it's slowly eroding your sense of self. But let's be clear. Men need respect, yes, but women need it just as deeply. Not the performative kind, the kind that says good job while ignoring your soul. Real respect means your thoughts matter, your time matters, your exhaustion matters, your dreams matter, even if they don't serve his agenda. Science confirms it. In relationships where mutual respect is present, both partners thrive. Conflict becomes connection. Differences become dialogue. Intimacy deepens. But where respect is one-sided, resentment grows like mold in the dark, silent, toxic, and eventually all-consuming. You were never too sensitive for wanting to be heard. You were never demanding for expecting basic dignity. You were simply asking for what every human being deserves, to be valued, not just used, not just managed, but truly valued. And if that feels radical, it's only because we've been taught to confuse endurance with virtue. But real strength isn't staying in a room where your voice doesn't count. Real strength is walking toward a life where it always will. You don't need to shrink to make space for his ego. You need to expand into the truth that your worth was never up for debate. And anyone who treats it like it is, they don't deserve a seat at your table. Modern marriage isn't anti-man, and it's certainly not anti-woman. But it is failing because we've replaced partnership with performance and equality with exhaustion. The truth no one wants to admit, the old model is dead. The man provides, the woman serves. That script collapsed under the weight of reality. Women entered the workforce in droves, not because they wanted to compete with men, but because they needed autonomy, purpose, and the right to feed their own souls. Yet instead of building something new together, many couples just layered new expectations onto old wounds. Now you're expected to be everything. A career woman who brings home income, a mother who's endlessly patient, a wife who's always available, a therapist who soothes his stress, a house manager who never drops the ball. And when you're drained, you're told you're not team players. When you ask for help, you're micromanaging. When you collapse under the weight, you're burnt out, as if it's a personal failing, not a systemic one. But here's what they won't say. Equality isn't about doing the same tasks. It's about sharing the mental load, the emotional labor, and the responsibility for the relationship's health. A healthy modern marriage isn't one where the man helps with the kids, as if they're not his. It's one where he owns his role as a parent. It's not where you allow him to cook dinner. It's where meals, laundry, and emotional check-ins are negotiated as shared duties, not favors. This isn't feminism stealing men's power. This is humanity demanding better for everyone. Because when women are free to be full people, not just caregivers or supporters, men are also freed from the crushing pressure to be the sole provider, freed to be vulnerable, freed to connect without performing. The goal isn't to flip the hierarchy. It's to dismantle it entirely. And if your marriage feels like a battlefield of unmet needs, it's not because equality failed. It's because true equality was never tried. You weren't meant to carry the world so he could rest. You were meant to walk beside him. Both of you tired, both of you trying, both of you honored for it. That's not a fantasy. It's a choice. And it starts the moment you stop apologizing for needing a real partner, not just a roommate with benefits. You're not lazy. You're not failing. You're not letting things slide. You're carrying an invisible weight most people don't even acknowledge exists: the mental load. It's not just doing the dishes, it's remembering the dishes need doing. It's knowing the kids have a dentist appointment next Tuesday. It's tracking whose socks are worn out when the car needs oil, which relatives feel slighted if you don't call, and whether there's enough toilet paper before the weekend guests arrive. And while you're managing this constant humming current of responsibility in your mind, he walks in, sees a full laundry basket, and says, "Why haven't you done the laundry yet?" As if it never occurred to him that someone has to notice it's full in the first place. This isn't about chores. This is about cognitive labor, the relentless planning, anticipating, and organizing that keeps a household alive. And in most heterosexual marriages, it falls almost entirely on women. Studies confirm it. Even when men help, women still carry 65 to 80% of the mental load. You're not imagining it. You're not too detail-oriented. You've been silently drafted as the family's CEO, scheduler, emotional regulator, and crisis manager, with no title, no salary, and no backup. And when you're exhausted, you're told to communicate better, as if the problem is your wording, not the fact that you shouldn't have to beg for basic participation. But here's the hidden cost. This constant mental burden doesn't just drain your energy, it erodes your sense of self. You stop thinking about your own dreams because there's no room left in your brain. You lose your spark because you've been reduced to a function, not a person. A true partnership doesn't require you to delegate your own peace. It means he initiates, he notices, he remembers, he acts, without being asked, without praise, without making it your job to manage his involvement. You were never meant to be the only one holding the sky up. And your exhaustion isn't weakness. It's proof you've been giving everything to a system that pretends you're not even holding the weight. It's time to stop carrying alone. Because a relationship where only one person sees the work isn't a partnership, it's performance. And you're the only one on stage. You've been made to feel guilty for something that was never your fault: the slow disappearance of intimacy in your marriage. Maybe it started subtly: a tired "not tonight," a shift away from cuddling, a growing distance in bed. At first, you wondered if you'd done something wrong. Maybe you weren't attractive enough. Maybe you'd gained weight. Maybe you talked too much about the kids, so you tried harder. You dressed up. You initiated. You waited patiently. And still, nothing. Then came the shame, the quiet voice whispering, if he doesn't want you, there must be something broken in you. But here's the truth they bury under layers of blame and porn-fueled myths. Sexless marriages aren't usually about desire. They're about disconnection. It's not that women withhold sex to punish men. It's that when a woman feels unseen, unheard, or emotionally abandoned, her body protects her by shutting down. Intimacy isn't just physical, it's emotional safety made flesh. And when that safety is gone, desire withers. Think about it. How can you open your body to someone who closes their mind to your pain? How can you feel wanted when your presence is treated as background noise? This isn't manipulation. This is biology meeting betrayal. And men suffer too, not because they're starved, but because they've been taught that sex is their right, not a shared in language of trust. They're rarely taught to ask, "Are you emotionally here with me?" Instead, they hear rejection and assume it's personal, not a symptom of a much deeper fracture. The real crisis isn't low libido. It's the loneliness inside the relationship. You can share a bed and still sleep in separate worlds. You can be married and still feel like a stranger in your own skin. But your lack of desire isn't failure. It's your body's honest answer to a question no one asked. Do you feel safe, cherished, and connected? And if the answer is no, your body won't lie to protect his ego. This isn't about fixing sex with more date nights or lingerie. It's about rebuilding the emotional bridge that intimacy walks across. Because you were never meant to perform desire in a vacuum. You were meant to be met with tenderness, patience, and presence. And until that happens, no amount of pressure, guilt, sulking, or silent treatment will bring back what was lost. Because real intimacy can't be demanded. It can only be invited by a love that sees you, not just wants you. Authority in marriage was never meant to be domination. But somewhere along the way, we confused leadership with control. And in doing so, we broke something sacred. You've likely felt it. The quiet erosion of your voice when decisions are made without you. The way your suggestions are met with a sigh. Your concerns brushed aside as overthinking. Maybe you've even been told, "Let me handle this," when what you really heard was, "You don't get a say." And if you push back, you're suddenly difficult, controlling, or emotional. But here's what real authority looks like in a healthy partnership. It's not about who has the final word. It's about who takes responsibility. True leadership in marriage isn't claiming power over someone. It's using your strength to protect, include, and uplift your partner. A man who leads with integrity doesn't shut you out. He asks, "What do you think?" He doesn't assume he knows best. He listens until he understands. He doesn't demand respect. He earns it by showing up with humility, consistency, and care. And you don't need permission to lead. Your intuition, your wisdom, your vision for your family, they matter just as much. Partnership isn't a throne with one seat. It's a table where both voices shape the future. The problem isn't that men have lost authority. The problem is that too many have mistaken authority for entitlement, while women have been punished for claiming their rightful place at the center of their own lives. But real strength doesn't need to dominate to feel secure. Real love doesn't silence to feel safe. If your home feels like a hierarchy instead of a haven, it's not because equality failed. It's because true shared leadership was never practiced. You were never meant to follow blindly. You were meant to co-create with someone who sees your mind as an asset, not a threat. And anyone who confuses control with leadership, they're not leading. They're hiding from the vulnerability real partnership requires. You've been told divorce is your fault because you gave up, because you didn't try hard enough, or because you dared to choose yourself after years of being invisible. But the truth, buried under layers of shame and social judgment, is this. Most women don't leave marriage for freedom. They leave because they've been emotionally abandoned long before they ever walked out the door. And yes, the system is flawed. Custody battles often favor mothers on paper, but that doesn't mean fathers are automatically cast aside. What it does mean is that courts, however imperfectly, recognize one undeniable pattern. In the majority of failing marriages, it's women who have shouldered the emotional, logistical, and relational weight until there's nothing left of them to give. Research shows that in heterosexual divorces, women initiate the split nearly 70% of the time. Not because they're ungrateful or chasing a fantasy, but because they've reached a breaking point after years of unmet needs, dismissed pain, and one-sided effort. They didn't leave because the house was messy. They left because their soul was. And yet society still whispers, "Why couldn't you make it work?" As if love is a math equation, where enough sacrifice equals success. But here's what no one admits. Staying in a dead marriage doesn't make you noble. It makes you complicit in your own erasure. The financial risks are real. The grief is real. The fear of starting over at 40, 50, or 60 is paralyzing. But so is waking up every day next to someone who treats your heart like an afterthought. You weren't disloyal for leaving. You were faithful to your truth, your dignity, and the quiet voice inside you that refused to let you disappear completely. And if you're still in it, wondering if you're overreacting, know this. You don't abandon a marriage because it's hard. You abandon it because it's empty. The real tragedy isn't divorce. It's the lie that staying silent is strength. Your choice to walk or to stay and demand change isn't failure. It's the bravest kind of self-respect. And no court, no judgment, no outdated script gets to define your worth based on whether you kept a broken promise alive. Because some promises were never meant to cost you your soul. Your children are not bargaining chips. They are not leverage. They are not a way to punish, control, or prove a point. And yet, so many of you have felt the quiet terror of watching your relationship with your own kids become collateral damage in a war you never wanted to fight. Maybe you stayed longer than you should have, terrified that divorce would mean losing them. Maybe you've been shut out of school meetings, doctor's appointments, or bedtime routines, not because you weren't present, but because your voice was deemed disruptive the moment you asked for fairness. Or perhaps you're the one being accused of alienating your children simply because you won't force them to pretend everything is fine when it's not. Here's the truth. They don't want you to speak aloud. Co-parenting fails not because mothers are vindictive, but because too many fathers disappear emotionally long before they ever leave the house. They show up for birthdays and soccer games, but not for the hard conversations. the tears at 2 a.m., the daily work of emotional presence. Then, when the marriage ends, they're shocked to find their children don't feel close to them and blame you for it. But here's what's undeniable. Children know. They feel who's truly there. And the system? It's flawed. Yes, custody arrangements have historically favored mothers, but not out of bias against men. It's because in most households, mothers have been the primary emotional and logistical anchors. That's not biology. It's conditioning. And it's changing. The real solution isn't to weaponize parenting. It's to raise a generation of fathers who show up before the marriage ends, not just as providers, but as nurturers, and mothers who are supported, not shamed, for protecting their children's emotional truth. You are not a gatekeeper. You are a guardian. And if you're fighting to keep your children connected to their father, even when he's been absent, you're not weak, you're generous. And if you're setting boundaries because he's harmful, inconsistent, or dismissive, you're not cruel. You're courageous. Your love for your children was never the problem. The problem was a system that treats parenting as a prize to be won, not a sacred responsibility to be shared. You were never meant to choose between your peace and your kids. You were meant to raise them in truth, with or without him. And that truth, it starts with you refusing to let anyone turn your love into a weapon. You've seen it 1,000 times. The bumbling dad on TV who can't change a diaper without chaos. The clueless husband who burns toast and forgets anniversaries. The man whose only role is to be the punchline while his wife rolls her eyes and saves the day. It's so normal you barely notice it anymore. But this isn't harmless entertainment. It's propaganda, and it's poisoning real relationships. These stereotypes don't just mock men, they excuse them. They teach boys that incompetence is cute, that emotional illiteracy is masculine, that showing up half-heartedly is enough. And they teach women that carrying the weight alone is just part of the job. But here's what they never show on screen. The father who quietly researches his child's anxiety because he wants to understand. The husband who notices his wife's exhaustion and makes dinner without being asked. The man who says, "Tell me what you need," and actually listens. Those men exist, but they're invisible in the stories we're fed because real partnership isn't funny. It's not dramatic, it doesn't sell ads. And the cost? We've normalized low expectations for men while burdening women with impossible ones. We call it comedy, but it's really a cage for everyone. Because when a man grows up believing his role is to be the lovable oaf, he never learns to be a true partner. And when a woman is told that managing his messes is her destiny, she stops believing she deserves more. This isn't about blaming media. It's about waking up to how deeply these scripts live inside us. You've apologized for needing reliability. You've minimized your frustration because that's just how men are. You've swallowed your disappointment because you were taught to expect less. But real love doesn't require you to lower your standards. It invites you to raise them and find someone who meets you there. The men who are capable, present, and emotionally mature, they're not rare. They're just not the ones being celebrated in the stories we consume. And you don't need a hero or a joke. You need a human. Flawed, yes, but willing to grow. Stop accepting caricatures as companions. Your life isn't a sitcom. It's a sacred story, and you deserve a co-author who shows up with both hands, both eyes open, and a heart ready to learn. Disrespect doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's quieter, more insidious. It's the way your opinion is met with a smirk, the way your pain is called drama, the way your achievements are minimized while your mistakes are magnified, the way you're spoken over, talked down to, or ignored, then told you're too sensitive for noticing. And because it's not violence, you've been taught to doubt yourself. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not that bad. But here's the truth backed by decades of psychological research. Chronic disrespect is a form of emotional abuse, and it damages the human psyche just as deeply as physical harm. Contempt, the eye rolls, the sarcasm, the dismissiveness is the single strongest predictor of divorce, according to the Gottman Institute. Not conflict, not disagreement, contempt. Because contempt says you are beneath me. And when that message is repeated day after day, year after year, it doesn't just hurt your relationship, it erodes your sense of self. You start to believe you're too much and not enough at the same time. You shrink, you silence yourself. You forget what your own voice sounds like. But this isn't weakness. This is what happens when someone you love treats your humanity as optional. And let's be clear, this pain isn't gendered. Men suffer from disrespect too, when their emotions are mocked, their efforts ignored, their vulnerability punished. But in the narrative that blames women for everything, We've erased the truth. Disrespect is toxic in any direction. What your soul needs isn't perfection from your partner, it's basic dignity. To be spoken to like you matter, to have your thoughts taken seriously, to feel safe expressing hurt without being labeled crazy or controlling. You were never too fragile for wanting kindness. You were human, deserving of the same courtesy you extend to strangers. And if your home is the one place you don't feel respected, that's not your failure. It's a boundary waiting to be drawn. Because love without respect isn't love. It's endurance, and you were never meant to confuse the two. You've been told that marriage should make you happy, that it's the ultimate reward for being good, patient, and selfless. But what if the real truth is this? Marriage doesn't create happiness, it reveals it. It doesn't fix loneliness, it magnifies it. It doesn't heal wounds, it exposes them. It doesn't give you purpose. It tests whether you already have one. And that's why so many women feel shattered when the fairy tale collapses. You gave everything, your youth, your dreams, your energy, believing that commitment would be met with care. Instead, you found yourself more alone than ever, trapped in a silence no one else could see. But here's what the data quietly confirms. People in healthy marriages do report higher well-being, but not because marriage itself is magical. It's because two emotionally mature people built something safe, reciprocal, and alive. Meanwhile, those in high conflict or neglectful marriages suffer worse mental and physical health than single people. Chronic stress from emotional disconnection raises cortisol, weakens immunity, and increases risk of depression, heart disease, and early mortality. So no, marriage isn't a wellness plan. It's a mirror. And if you're exhausted, resentful, or numb, it's not because you failed at love. It's because you've been pouring your life into a vessel with holes and blaming yourself for the emptiness. But your longing for peace isn't selfish. Your need for emotional safety isn't excessive. Your desire to feel cherished, not just tolerated, isn't fantasy. It's the baseline of human dignity. The real tragedy isn't that your marriage isn't perfect. It's that you've been taught to stay in a desert and call it home. You were never meant to trade your wholeness for a ring. You were meant to share your wholeness with someone who protects it. And if you haven't found that, it's not too late to choose yourself, not as a last resort, but as your first act of true love. You don't have to be married to be whole. You don't have to be in a relationship to be worthy. And you certainly don't have to endure a loveless marriage to prove you're committed. Yet society still whispers, sometimes shouts, that a woman alone is incomplete. That if you're single past 30, divorced after 40, or choosing solitude after 50, you've somehow failed at life. But here's the quiet revolution no one talks about. More women than ever are choosing themselves and thriving, not out of bitterness, not out of fear, but out of clarity. They've seen what happens when you stay in a marriage that drains your spirit, when you trade your peace for the illusion of security, your voice for the comfort of routine, your future for the weight of what if. And they've realized being alone is not the same as being lonely. In fact, many women report deeper connection, greater joy, and more authentic freedom outside of dysfunctional partnerships than they ever felt inside them. They rebuild careers, reclaim hobbies, rediscover friendships, sleep through the night without bracing for tension. This isn't about rejecting love. It's about refusing counterfeit love, the kind that demands your silence, your shrinkage, your surrender. And if you're still in a marriage that feels like slow suffocation, know this: choosing to leave isn't failure. Choosing to stay and demand change isn't weakness. But choosing to believe you deserve more, that's courage. Your worth was never tied to a title, wife, girlfriend, partner. It was always rooted in your humanity, your resilience, your wisdom, your capacity to love without losing yourself. So if you're standing at the crossroads, torn between the life you built and the life you deserve, don't let shame decide for you. Because the most radical act of love you can offer the world is to stop betraying yourself. You are not less than because you're alone. You are finally free to become who you were meant to be, with or without him. You've been told that wanting more than duty is selfish, that longing for passion, presence, and partnership means you're unrealistic, that if you just accept how men are, you'd finally find peace. But what if your desire for deeper connection isn't a flaw? It's your biology speaking. Human beings aren't wired for transactional coexistence. We're built for bond, for oxytocin-fueled closeness, for eye contact that says, I see you, for touch that isn't just functional, but tender. And yes, women often carry a deep primal need for emotional safety as the gateway to physical intimacy. It's not manipulation, it's neurochemistry. When you feel disconnected, when conversations are logistical, touch is absent, and your heart feels like a burden, you don't shut down because you're withholding. You shut down because your nervous system is protecting you from vulnerability in an unsafe space. And men? Many are starving too, not just for sex, but for the kind of intimacy that lets them be soft, seen, and held without judgment. But they've been taught to confuse control with closeness, performance with love. So they chase physical connection without understanding that for most women, the body follows the heart. Monogamy isn't the problem, emotional neglect is. Forced fidelity in a loveless marriage doesn't create virtue. It creates resentment, secrecy, or quiet despair. But conscious monogamy, chosen daily, nurtured with curiosity and care, can be one of the most profound forms of human bonding. You weren't designed to endure a marriage that feels like roommates sharing a lease. You were designed to co-create a sanctuary with someone who shows up not just in body, but in spirit. And if that feels missing, it's not your job to fake desire to soothe his ego. It's your responsibility to honor your truth and invite him into real repair, or walk toward a love that doesn't ask you to betray yourself to keep it. Because intimacy can't be demanded. It can only be grown in the fertile soil of mutual trust, respect, and relentless tenderness. And you deserve that garden, not as a reward for silence, but as your birthright. You've been told that women today are raised to dominate, to disrespect men, to see masculinity as toxic and husbands as liabilities. But what if the real story is far more human than that? What if women aren't out to destroy men, but are simply trying to survive a world that taught them their value depended on being small, silent, and self-sacrificing? For generations, women were punished for having opinions, for setting boundaries, for wanting more than a college, a kitchen, and a ring. So when feminism rose, it wasn't about hating men, it was about refusing to disappear. But in the backlash, that cry for equality got twisted into a war cry. Suddenly, a woman asking to be heard was emasculating. A woman choosing her career was abandoning her role. A woman leaving a loveless marriage was destroying the family. And in that distortion, both men and women lost. Because the truth is, most women don't want to control men. They want to connect with them. They don't want a servant or a subordinate. They want a partner, someone who doesn't see their strength as a threat, their voice as an attack, or their needs as a burden. And yes, some women do carry bitterness, especially after years of emotional neglect, betrayal, or being treated as an afterthought. But that bitterness isn't empowerment. It's grief in disguise. Just as many men carry rage, not because women took their power, but because they were never taught how to be vulnerable, how to listen, how to love without performing. We're not enemies. We're wounded people trying to love with broken tools. The real enemy isn't men. It's the toxic scripts we inherited. That love means silence for her, dominance for him. That respect must be earned through service, not given through dignity. That partnership is a battle for control, not a dance of mutual care. But healing is possible, not by retreating into gender camps, but by choosing every day to see each other as humans first. You don't have to shrink to make him feel tall. He doesn't have to armor up to feel worthy. Real strength isn't in winning the power struggle. It's in laying down the weapons and building something better together. Because the women who truly thrive aren't the ones who dominate. They're the ones who choose partners who rise with them, not against them. And that's not feminism. That's humanity. This isn't about winning. It's not about men versus women, scorecards, or who suffers more. The real crisis in modern relationships isn't inequality. It's the absence of mutual care. Somewhere along the way, we replaced love with logistics, partnership with performance, and intimacy with endurance. We built marriages on outdated scripts, unspoken expectations, and the dangerous myth that love should just work if you're meant to be. But real love doesn't run on autopilot. It runs on daily choices: to listen instead of defend, to notice instead of wait to be asked, to honor your partner's humanity even when you're hurt, to take responsibility for your own healing instead of demanding they fix you. You were never meant to be your husband's mother, his therapist, or his emotional janitor. And he was never meant to be your provider, protector, and punching bag, rolled into one. That's not partnership. That's role-playing. And it leaves both of you exhausted, unseen, and lonely in a crowd of two. The healthiest relationships aren't the ones without conflict. They're the ones where conflict becomes a bridge, not a weapon. Where I feel matters more than you always. Where repair is prioritized over being right. And it starts with a radical shift. Stop asking, why won't he change? Start asking, Am I with someone who wants to grow? With me? Because you can't build a sanctuary with someone who refuses to lay down bricks. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. If your marriage feels like a battlefield, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've been fighting for connection in a system that never taught you how to build it. But it's not too late. You can choose to stay and demand a new foundation built on respect, reciprocity, and emotional courage. Or you can choose to leave and stop confusing loyalty with self-abandonment. Either way, your peace is non-negotiable, because the goal isn't to survive your marriage, it's to thrive in it or walk away with your soul intact. And that begins the moment you stop accepting love that feels like labor and start believing you deserve love that feels like coming home.